Hi guys, this is Pilleater. Today I am joined with Matt Forney. Hi Matt.
Thanks for having me on the show, Pilleater.
And I'm also joined here with Robert Stark.
Hi, Pilleater. Hi, Matt. Nice talking to you again.
So, I really liked that speech you did on the identitarian ideals in Sweden, I think it was. I was actually watching the live stream a bit before I had to go to a same WN event that very same day, actually. And I thought it was very poetic, and it was I could relate to that, what you were talking about. It was very short, and it's something very about almost today's society, almost like a red pill and a single poetic statement. How was the reaction of that, and how did you feel about writing that?
Yeah. Well, first off, I have to issue a quick correction. The name of the conference was Identitarian Ideas, not Identitarian Ideals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah.
Okay.
This was my first public speaking engagement of any type in about close to a decade, and my first one speaking in front of a nationalist alt-right audience. So I kind of, I was out of practice, but the audience seemed to really like it. I've been told that the speech itself was actually pretty well written. My performance could have been a bit better. I was a bit nervous when I got up there and I think it showed kind of, but yeah, I was inspired to sort of talk about. Kind of my specialty for the past year. I spent most of 2016 on the road covering the presidential election and kind of observing the changes that have been happening in America. And I went and did a whole bunch of different things. I extensively reported on the Iowa caucuses. I think Robert actually had me on the Stark Troops to discuss that about a year ago. I was at the infamous riot that happened when Donald Trump tried to have a rally in Chicago. I was at both the Republican and Democratic national conventions. And I see these changes happening in America. As I talk about in the speech, Trump was embraced by the alt-right and by nationalists, even though he's not a racial nationalist. That's pretty evident from his speeches, the way he acts, and the people he surrounds himself with. But he represents a sort of he represents implicit white identity, an implicit identity for America, whereas the traditional strains, leftism obviously represents globalism, the melding of the world's cultures into a gigantic gray goo that is. Of consumerism and mindless hedonism, and the right represents more or less the same thing, but at a slower rate. The conservatism of George W. Bush, Mitt Romney, John McCain is just this sort of bland, idealistic, appealing to the Constitution and the proposition nation. It's just another different toilet, same shit in regards to globalism. Trump represents a different brand of conservatism, of right wing ideology, nationalism, blood and soil nationalism. Where no, our country is not just an open air garbage dump where everyone can come in and be claimed to be an American after they've done the Pledge of Allegiance. No, America is an identity. White America specifically is an identity. They're a people, and I see this consciousness emerging after not just due to Trump and the alt-right, but due to the left just bashing whites continuously, particularly getting bad in the last half of Obama's tenure, where whites are blamed for everything. We're blamed for poverty. We're blamed for our white privileges oppressing, minorities, and white men are oppressing white women, etc. And as soon as we just disappear, the world will be better off. And this election and this movement in America is a revolt against that. It's like no, we have a right to exist too. We're going to assert our existence, and if you don't like it, well, you can go to hell, basically.
I remember when I first talked to you several years ago, and when I followed your early work on your original blog, Amalafida, and your early Matt Forney work, you said that you rejected the left and the right equally more so back then. And I think obviously back then we had like George Bush and then John McCain, Mitt Romney, and the Tea Party was pretty ineffective. Now I've noticed you strongly turn to the right and you say that there's a battle between the left and the right and you have to pick a side. Can you explain your political transformation, and was it primarily because of Trump?
Well, my transformation was just more of I've always considered myself right wing in some sense or another. In the sense that I believe in the nation and whatnot. But I was relatively apolitical up until about a couple years ago. In the sense that I sort of followed it, but was like, who cares? It's a bit like Aaron Clary's phrase, "Enjoy the climb." I assume that society and the West would just continue to slide down the muck of leftism. There's nothing we could do to stop it. So we might as well try to improve ourselves and enjoy our lives and do what we can in our personal lives. What sort of pushed me to start caring a bit more was actually about 3 years ago when I lived in the Philippines for a bit, and I've sold this to a bunch of other people, and I have sort of written about it on my blog. The whole cliche about how fish don't know that they're in water until you take them out of it. Well, you don't know the benefits of your culture. You don't know the benefits of your society until you're out of it. And I was in a country, the Philippines, which was very alien to the way I thought, the way Americans do things. Even though the country has had a lot of American influence, that sort of affected my perspective and made me realize, my culture is something that's worth preserving and fighting for. And what happened around that time was when we started seeing serious blows being struck against cultural Marxism, first with Gamergate, which was a mass campaign to get cultural Marxism out of the video game industry, which sort of snowballed into the Trump campaign and nationalism across the West. My perspective now is that basically the main struggle is broadly between right and left, but the right being nationalism and the left being globalism. And we've seen that more or less accelerated with the Trump campaign. We see the left suddenly endorsing all the things they claimed to have hated before just because they hate Trump. They're in favor of the CIA. They're in favor of corporate mass media. They're in favor of all the stuff that they railed against during the Obama and Bush years, because all these entities are opposed to Trump, who they regard as literally Hitler. So, I believe in nationalism. I want to ensure a continued existence for my people, and I believe I believe we have a chance of doing that. Our chances of doing so are far stronger than at any point in my running career, at any point in probably my lifetime or any of our lifetimes.
Yeah, that's going to be the crucial battle of the future: nationalism versus globalism. That's how the right and the left are becoming to be defined. I think what your writings in the past were more about is sort of the critique of the right of Reaganomics. And I remember we did that show on Mark Ames's Going Postal, where he was a strong critic of Reagan. On economic issues, are you still critical of corporate capitalism? Have your views moved to the right on economics as well?
Well, I believe in the sense that we need a capitalistic system we need an economic system that rewards ingenuity and hard work and success, and punishes laziness. Because what sort of I had an experience obviously at the in Stockholm, speaking at the Identitarian Ideas 9 conference. You have a lot of figures in the alt-right who are saying stuff like, well, white people can make any economic system works, or socialism will work if we get rid of all the black people and the Jews. And I have Sweden is obviously is one of the models of social democracy and the welfare state. The actual Swedes I interacted with there at the conference can't stand it. The economic system in Sweden destroys creativity. It destroys ingenuity. You have 2/3 of your income being taxed away to support government programs. Everything there is really expensive, heinously expensive. Stockholm was the most expensive city I've ever been to. A bottle of water at a 7-Eleven costs like the equivalent of $3. You can a subway ticket costs $5.
That was true when I visited Vegas as well, but that was different reasons.
Yeah. A bottle of beer is $10, and so you cannot have a system which encourages grifting, because it makes people weak, and it also opens the door up to all this. That's why Sweden is being taken apart by immigration and refugees, because the socialist system has bred a generation of Swedes who are extremely, leftist and weak, and and don't see these dangers. But at the same time, we have to also, we cannot allow corporations to run roughshod either. As we've seen the U.S., as was sort of predicted by James Burnham in The Managerial Revolution, corporations and the government have basically merged into a singular entity who are out for themselves and out to sort of push the same agenda. This is why we see, corporate figures like Goldman Sachs types executives going from government to the private sector and back again. That's why we see corporations like Twitter and whatnot pushing leftist ideology. So the best way to describe my economics is like I'm like a Christopher Cantwell or a Hans Hermann Hoppe type of libertarian, where we have to get rid of the leftists first, and then we can have an open market of success. And we have to have an economic system that will ensure that those leftists, those parasites, aren't allowed to rise again.
If you were in Sweden, and if you follow a lot of the right-wing blogs like the alt-right and Breitbart, there's this notion that Sweden is completely collapsing with the Islamic invasion and rioting. I mean, how bad is it based on your observations in regards to that issue?
Well, I'll point out that in terms of proportion of minorities, Stockholm is still whiter than, say, any city in the U.S. I lived in Chicago for the longest time. Stockholm has fewer minorities than Chicago does, but the thing I observed there is that the black people in Sweden and the racial minorities are, number one, they're not integrated with the culture at all, and number two, they have a very visible contempt and sort of anger towards the white Swedish majority. That's where you get a lot of this violence, such as that case of the Swedish girl who was gang raped by Arabs, and it was live streamed. They have the people, these immigrants who are coming into Sweden. They view the Swedes with contempt because from their perspective, they respect power and and authority, and they see the Swedes just being so nice to them, giving them all the stuff, giving them all these free food, free housing, letting them come to the country, and they think the Swedes are a bunch of suckers, and they're like, yeah, we'll play these people for as much as we can get. From my perspective, I didn't get to explore the city as much as I would have liked. I was only there for a couple of days, but from my perspective, from what I saw and from what I speaking of the Swedes, Sweden has it can recover, but it's going to be a hard row to hoe, a harder row compared to other Western European countries. Because one thing with the Swedes and the other Scandinavian peoples, they're very conformist. They're very sort of, individual Swedes are less willing to sort of, compared to Americans, are less willing to dissent politically because they don't want to be ostracized. It's a culture that's all about social integration. But at the same time, that means that if Sweden ever goes right-wing, it's going to go right-wing much faster than any other country in the West, because you'll see all these leftists who are talking about, like, well, I'm sad when I discovered there are people who still believe in borders. They're going to become, right-wing nationalists overnight, at least openly, to avoid social censure. That's my perspective on Sweden. It can recover, but it's going to be a hard road getting there and very difficult.
You were recently in my hometown of LA. You said it reminded you of a lot of these like third world cities you visited, like in the Philippines. What were some of your biggest observations on LA? And you'd say LA is much worse than Sweden?
LA is hell on earth. LA is California. I think in general is just gone. As I put it right now, I live in Budapest, Hungary. I feel more at home in Hungary than I did in California. Part of my observation of LA may have been the fact that I didn't rent a car there. I took the metro, the subway and light rail system, which is that's one of the aspects of LA living and multiculturalist, globalist designs for humanity.
Are you talking about the green line to the blue lines? That basically goes through South Central.
Yeah, I actually got to technically visit Compton, but the light rail and the subway themselves are only used by poor people and minorities, because if you can afford to own a car in LA, you own a car. The only people on the subway are those who can't afford a car or aren't allowed to drive one. They don't have a license or whatever. So you encounter a lot of low class people. The people I encountered in LA were very superficial, very sort of distrusting and kind of cliquish. The city itself is pretty physically unappealing. It's just the weather's nice. I'll give it that, really nice. But the buildings have this like sort of rundown, almost third world quality to them. There are dozens of. I'm surrounded by Latinos constantly, like peasant class Mexicans who can barely even speak their own language properly, and it's basically like Blade Runner, but without the flying cars, more or less. There are some things I do like about LA. Like I said, I like the weather. I like the proximity to the beach. But the city as a whole is a pretty stark example of what the globalists have in mind for us. A massive underclass, massive racially mixed underclass scraping to get by, and like the beautiful people isolated in their Hollywood Hills mansions away from everyone else.
That totally. Robert always tells me I should go to California, as it seems to be the biggest racial mix. Seems to be there. They're like Jewish, Asian, and white. Those seems to be the racially mixed class. But at the same time, it's like this. Like you just said, it's a Blade Runner society, and it doesn't seem to be that functional. And it's actually, I don't know. I think Calexit might actually happen in the future.
I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does, California is going to become as poor as, say, Brazil overnight, because the city is barely functional. You can barely get the subways running on time, and can't even, if you can't stop. Another fun observation is that I'm walking around in Hollywood. I was staying in Hollywood, and I'm watching bums just picking out trash from the trash cans in full view of everyone. There's so many homeless people there. If California can't solve these basic social problems, they're not going to survive without being part of the U.S.
I think the only way to really save California would be to have like a Stalin-like figure come in and like deport the underclass and confiscate the wealth of the parasitic elites.
Is that like Roger Blackstone?
Yeah.
Well, that may just. Yeah, basically. And the other thing, too, most of the California economy is like they keep them, but California has the largest economy in the world or some nonsense like that. But stuff like Silicon Valley, that benefits only come so long as they're part of the U.S. When California were to secede, you'd see all these businesses fleeing to Nevada. I mean, they already kind of are, but they'd be fleeing back into the U.S. to retain access to Washington, D.C. and all that. As an independent entity, California basically would not. They'd be begging to be let back in the union within 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, especially talking about that ideal too, about how this nationalism is going to come about. Right now, it seems like everybody in the millennial generation is a NEET. I mean, I can talk for this myself. I mean, if you're unemployed or not in education, you're just living at home on a trust fund. And it's like, it's materialistic, and it's like you don't go anywhere. And like, at the same time, however, there is this red-pilling manosphere nature going on. I mean, actually, as you were mentioning, Aaron early on, I was getting some asshole consulting on his one YouTube channel, and he told me, you're just a dipshit 22-year-old, and you just got to get a job. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty good advice. So,
Matt, did you see that video that Pilleater commissioned for Aaron Clary?
I may have seen it, but he puts out so many videos I can't remember any individual ones.
It's pretty funny. You have Pilleater. You can explain what happens.
Oh no, he just basically said, get out there, go get a job, and then just don't think about the esoteric stuff, and then.
Or you said just like try to find an Asian girlfriend, but don't turn your sexual fetish into political ideology.
I don't remember that part, but I don't know. But the whole thing, the point
that is something he'd do, yeah.
But the point is, it's a neat thing, and I think Aaron's wisdom, especially in his book Worthless, I really like his whole take on the whole undergrad school about how. Everybody's going to college, think they're going to get a degree, but it doesn't really. It's just this thing that's LARPing thing that doesn't really make you just get robbed of your money. And I think his whole book on Bachelor of Economics is really helpful. So how would someone who's a NEET would make a transition to like a self-independent or even nationalist, or even how could you say like a manosphere kind of game person to be more self-independent?
Well, I honestly have difficulty even kind of relating to that, because I guess I kind of got lucky in that I actually had a pretty good job when I graduated, even before I graduated college, and from there I just sort of eventually ended up to where I am now, financially independent, living off of my writing. But I think actually that the whole a lot of the impetus towards nationalism in the past and the right wing in the past couple of years is actually coming as a result of the economic devastation of millennials. As I commented recently in the election last year, Donald Trump won the largest share of young whites between the ages of 18 and 29. That's the first time since the 80s that any part of the millennial, or not the millennial, the demographic of 18 to 29-year-olds has voted for a Republican candidate. The alt-right was largely driven on kind of by these young kids who are sharing memes and and shit posting on Twitter and trolling famous writers for the Washington Post and whatnot, because the leftist paradigm has completely destroyed their future. They've 8 years of Obama has made everyone economically worse off, and they reacted in part by becoming. The first reaction was with Bernie Sanders, obviously, but a lot of them all moved over to Trump. So I see, and we have some reports coming out now that Generation Z, the generation that was born after 2004, is actually going to be more conservative than millennials, more right-wing than millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers. So we're seeing a movement.
And you also take into account the demographic changes. Obviously, the younger demographic is more diverse, but if you look at the Generation Z that is white, you're saying they're more conservative than the say Generation X or millennials.
Yes, because they've kind of, well, part of it in many ways is that in order to revolt, you have to kind of be right wing. The left is sort of traded for decades off of their image as the edgy rebels who are we're gonna rebel against stultifying social norms by having sex on the road and doing this and doing that and doing drugs. Now all the people who were rebelling by doing that shit, now they're in charge of the culture. They're in charge of the government. So now you've got to revolt by being, a boring family man with 2 kids and a wife in the suburbs or something. That's the new rebellious thing to do now. Is to not be a total degenerate. So a lot of young people are kind of attracted to that on that basis alone.
That's funny because I had a Dissidents in America class at my university, and it basically was teaching about these far left guys who would do. And I remember telling my professor, "Hey, what if you were just this pretty much chaste person who basically, could you be radical?" And she was like, "Okay, yeah, you could be radical," but really in return it's like, nah, they're hostile to doing the right thing. And yet you make a great point, because it's so true that the upper class is decadent. And so the upper middle class, I would say most NEETs would be in, or maybe some of the all people who attend college is upper middle class. They all have this aristocratic value that think the upper class has values and that you should emulate like them, when in return they don't understand that the upper class is decadent and they like strange avant-garde stuff like Feral House books and all this strange avant-garde stuff. And you start to realize, even the people who write the English GREs, it's kind of strange when they want you to learn a gay black science fiction writer.
Well, if you want to rebel, it's you have to go to one extreme or the other. You have to be a hardcore social conservative, or you have to be Peter Sotos.
Exactly. It's this strange. It's like we said this before. It's it's either a Nazi pedophile. It's the two bad things, the baddest of bads, right? The morally bad is that, but at the same time, they're still the decadent upper class. They'll save it if you're black, right? So if you're a black Nazi and pedophile, oh, that's pretty radical. That's pretty, and it just shows you how disgusting it is. And it's kind of sad that the upper middle class, they think there's an aristocratic thing, but they fall for it,
Yeah, and another thing, too, is that the younger generations have been more or less liberated from a lot of the taboos that paralyzed baby boomers and Generation X. I wrote about this in an article from my blog. I forget the title, something like how I learned to stop hating and like and love the millennials. Basically, part of the reason why our baby boomers and Gen Xers are more anti-racist or more left wing is because they were around when all this shit happened, and it's was a formative part of their experience. Whereas for our generation and for kids who are even younger, stuff like the Holocaust, the Civil Rights Movement, etc. That's just shit you read about in a history book. We've got no connection to it whatsoever. We don't see these civil rights marches. What we see in terms of race relations these days is stuff like Ferguson or the Trayvon Martin incident, or those savages in Chicago kidnapped a retarded white boy and tortured him on a live stream, stuff like that, and we call it like it is. These kids on Twitter who are trolling with swastikas and oven memes, they're doing it in part because they don't feel any sort of they've been liberated by that they're liberated from the taboos that hold back older generations.
Yeah, I even noticed that kind of in my early middle school years, before the internet got big, even into high school. I mean, there was this religious irreverence around those kind of historical events, and now, I mean, obviously you still have that, but you have this culture of irreverence. I'm not just talking about the alt-right, even among liberals who watch stuff like South Park.
Yeah. Basically, because older people have become so serious and milk and about this stuff. Well, and the other thing too is that people have become so hypersensitive that it's very easy to get a rise out of people. Back in 2013, 2014, it was so easy for writers that say sites like Return of Kings and whatnot to just trigger the shit out of leftists and feminists by just writing something as simple as say short hair makes you unattractive, or girls with tattoos and piercings make bad girlfriends, or stuff like that, and people would go nuts and have the death threats like that. It's only a matter of time before other people see this and they start to get in on the action too, because everyone loves making busybodies and overly sensitive people and crybabies upset. That's part of the joy of this whole right wing meme troll subculture. It's about making the comfortable and the powerful uncomfortable and laughing at their misery.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's I'm kind of sick of it too. I mean, it's really strange. I also think there's about a difference between introvert and extrovert, right? The introvert is always said, "Oh, you're a loser. You stay in your mom's basement, and you're not gonna go. You're living, flyover country." And supposedly the extrovert, the person who is social and they go out to bars, are supposedly the most successful person, or even the pathetic ideal of I have this theory that all of hardcore punk music is an upper class thing, and basically the upper class likes hardcore punk because it's their basically leftist mentality of overthrowing something, and it just shows you the whole Antifa that basically punched Richard Spencer and tried to take down Milo. It's the only time you will ever have a white people chimp out is because white people are in this ideal, this upper class white people believe in anarchist ideology. And they basically read books like Days of War, Nights of Love, and these anarchist theory where they feel like they're fighting against the man or something really pathetic, and it's really something only within white people this generation. And it's the post-baby boomer thing. I don't know what to make of it. I think you might have to be critical of that whole anarchist and punk millennium and maybe just be hey, move on from that. But I don't know whether that punk music is basically an innate thing that white people like. Another thing in Christian Landers, stuff white people like.
Yeah, every punk person I know has been into punk rock has eventually become a complete and total faggot.
Exactly.
There was actually an amusing incident a few weeks back it was Evan McMullen of all people tweeted out a Dead Kennedys song, something anti-Trump, and the Dead Kennedys tweeted back at him approving of what he did. Evan McMullen, a CIA guy, is getting the stamp of number one, he listens to fucking San Francisco punk rock music, and number two, the punk rock band gives him the thumbs up.
Exactly.
What the hell is going on there?
That's
it
what I'm
kind
saying.
of reminds me of how the left is now trying to rehabilitate George Bush. When they used to, from a leftist perspective, George Bush did far more horrible things than Trump did. I mean, he was a war criminal, but now he's just this kind of a lovable idiot.
He's part of the resistance now. He's leading the resistance. And it also kind of solidifies. Well, it's a bit like actually when Hillary Clinton actually did outreach to the Bush family during the campaign. That was one of the many reasons why she lost, because everybody hates George W. Bush. I've actually had like leftists who are like, an argument with me was like, they'll always refer to like your boy Bush or your buddy, George W. Bush. I hated George W. Bush. First year I was eligible to vote, 2006. I voted Democratic down the line just because I was so pissed off at Bush and the war in Iraq. Okay, I don't have any kinship towards Bush. That guy just needs to go away, shut up, and never speak again. That's my opinion of George W. Bush.
We're also grateful to have Trump, is because it's almost like he's trying to push out the whole neoconservative thing, even saying that the Bushes were wrong during the Republican debate. That's definitely, the whole neoconservative party is getting shocked now, and we're changing definitions of the whole, alt-right coming in.
Yeah, all the neocons can go back. The neocons used to claim that they were liberals who were mugged by reality. Well, when you parse that statement, it means realizing that they still are liberals at heart. So they can go back to the left, they can go back to the Democrats, which is where they belong.
Well, I think you will see a lot of them joining the Democrats. I mean, some of them support Trump because Trump is more pro-Israel, but Trump has actually successfully divided them, thus weakening their power.
Yeah, that acceleration would have happened a lot faster if what's his face, the gay black Muslim Keith Ellison had become the DNC chair. Putting that other guy Tom Perez in it, who was a total Clinton plant and is pro-Israel, has kind of forestalled that for the moment. But yeah.
What do you see as the future trends of both the Republican and Democratic Party as far as ideology, and do you see major divides and split-ups?
The Republicans are pretty overtly going to become the party of white people. It's sort of a looser coalition of the coalition that voted for Trump to begin with. It'll be sort of working class whites, middle class whites, with the traditional parts of the Republican Party, along with more working-class white Democrats, which is, again, a big reason why Trump was able to win, because he took back states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which have a lot of working-class Democratic Union whites, whereas the Democrats are basically going to become a party of conflicting minority interests. That would have really accelerated had Ellison become the DNC chair, but Perez is going to do it as well, because basically the two of them were more or less competing as to who could be the more anti-white. The Democrats on the left are just outright convinced that the reason they lost the last election is because they didn't pander to minorities enough. So what we're going to see is that their anti-white pandering is just going to get worse and worse and worse. Next year there is going to be a total bloodbath. I've joked that we may end up in a situation kind of like where the Democrats will have maybe 100 House seats and 35 Senate seats. They're going to get they've already been exterminated at all levels of power. It's just going to get worse. Eventually, I assume, I would expect somewhere down the line that they'll eventually realize that they're going in the wrong direction, and that they'll try to rekindle support with working class whites, but that's not going to happen until 2022 at the earliest. The Schumer types, the Tom Perez types are firmly in the driver's seat now. So I see we're going to have Republican control at most levels of government until 2022 at the earliest.
Do you think that demographics makes it inevitable that in the long run there'll be a Democratic majority?
No, it's not inevitable, because Trump is taking steps right now to limit legal immigration and combat illegal immigration. And number two, as long as whites continue to move into the Republican Party, it's the Democrats are at a distinct disadvantage because sorry, I lost my train of thought here. But basically, the predictions back in 2008 that the Republicans would be the permanent minority party were predicated on the fact that Midwestern whites, working class whites, would continue to support the Democrats in large numbers, and as the numbers have shown, they haven't. They've been slowly moving over to the Republicans. They moved over to the Republicans in a big way last year with Trump, and if the Democrats basically are reduced to a party that appeals to minorities and to like a certain subset of coastal whites in places like California and New York. One of my friends put it like this: the reason why the Republicans keep winning is because the Democrats are doing things that they make places like California and New York from 60% blue to 65% blue, but they also end up making places like Wisconsin and Michigan 48% red to 52% red. The Democrats have to appeal to their coastal, their coastal core demographic, which just happens to alienate everyone else.
And that will mean Republicans having to appeal to the strong white middle class base. They may have to they will have to go to more centrist or to the left on other issues, and I think that's a positive trend.
We could argue actually that Donald Trump is more economically left already than Hillary Clinton was, because he was against free trade and TPP and NAFTA. So in the future of the Republican Party is, after the purges are complete, it's going to be anti-corporate capitalism, populist, protectionist, and about safeguarding the interests of the middle class and the working class. Whereas it looks like the Democrats are going to become the party of corporate cronyism. The corporate types all lined up behind Hillary Clinton in the last election. Groups like the Koch brothers, who had funded the Republican Party heavily, they refused to give anything to Trump, and they just piled their money into supporting individual Republican candidates for Senate or whatever. So we're going to see very strong polarization economically, where the Republicans become a populist party and the Democrats become a corporate crony party.
Or could you see a third party breaking up, either a socialist party breaking off the Democratic Party, or like a Michael Bloomberg type, like plutocratic third party?
I don't really see it, just because the American system so far has been really resistant to third parties sort of rising up. Our current Democratic-Republican split has since the 1850s. I don't really the system that many states have set up more or less precludes third parties from rising up. So unless there's some sort of massive schism in the Democratic Party, I think the two-party system is here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future.
See, as a rule of Asians in the future of America, and do you see an increase in white male, Asian female couples?
I really can't speak to that, because I'm honestly not that familiar with it. I mean, everyone seems to stereotype me as the guy who's like all about yellow fever, but the thing is, that's because I went to the Philippines, and prior to that, and since then, I haven't really interacted. I haven't actually dated any Asian women since coming back from the Philippines. It's kind of both due to my personal beliefs and due to my logistical reality. So I really can't say how Asians are going to interact with the American population in the future. It's something I really don't have any insight on.
Now, something that's interesting is there's that, I love that article when you were talking about how, you're against, race mixing, and saying, because I often put up these points too. It's like, I don't advocate race mixing at all. I'm just saying, if current trends continue, like in California, it seems to me that the multicultural and diverse paradigm, it just seems that these upper class whites, they're all choosing like Asian girlfriends and Asian wives, and they're having these Hapa-Hafu offsprings, right? And if you ever read the, Hapa subreddit, right, it turns out that all the Hapas are mentally retarded, or that they're crazy, or Elliot Rodgers, and that just gives you fuel for the alt-right, or at least the right, to say, stick with your race. It makes sense. However, at the same time, what are you supposed to do? I mean, I'm sounding like a liberal at heart, but what are you supposed to do when you have like tons of like this post, it's like millennial or post Gen X thing, when you have like a bunch of Eurasian kids, and they're like, do they associate with their white side, or do they associate the Asian side, or? And my argument is like, look, I guess what's going to happen is they're going to be Asian Aryans, and they're going to be like, they're going to take in this red pilling alt-right thing, and basically they're going to do their own thing, or at least when we have the Richard Spencer ethno-states, there'll be the white ethno-state and the Chinese ethno-state, and then you have this little bridge the size of Chinatown where you have all the weebs, the Eurasians, the whitewashed Asians, and the and then it'll just happen like that or something. And that's me being like very science fiction, but I've been pretty much been talking with that, and I've been connecting with other people who are kind of sympathetic. I mean, if you call me a liberal or not, but I'm just saying being prepared to it. If the red pill generation, it's post-multicultural and diverse, then that means including the mixed race people are going to have to, draw lines,
Well, I look at it this way. Part of the reason why multiracial children have such a hard time fitting in is because society denigrates whiteness and denigrates white people. And if we lived in a healthy society in which white people weren't constantly being bashed every which way, biracial children would have an easier time assimilating into white culture, from my observation.
Yes.
There are a lot of like, for example, I think I went over this in the article. There's a lot of Southerners, for example, who will claim to have a partial Cherokee ancestry. We're not talking like Elizabeth Warren types, but they're like they had like a Cherokee ancestor somewhere in the family tree snuck into the woodpile. Yeah, no one would argue that they're not white people, that they're not having a Cherokee woman sneak into the woodpile a few generations back screwed them up for life, because that all happened back when society was healthy and was not encouraging all this anti-white hatred. So I would say that a lot of Hapas would have an easier time of integrating into white society if and they probably will, because the globalist paradigm is just falling apart all around us. If they weren't constantly being told that if everyone wasn't constantly being told that white people are the literal devil.
That's what I'm saying. It's the Asian yellow pill them and make them Asian Aryans. I mean, I've been talking to some people actually in real life. I'm in Chinatown, Philadelphia, but it's like, it's true. There's this subtle Asian Aryan thing going on. Once again, we were talking about how hardcore punk is this upper class thing. Yeah, it's an upper class and upper middle class thing, but once again, I believe that the upper class attitude will trickle down, and like all these white male, Asian female couples at like vegan restaurants, punk rock shows, art galleries, and nerd conventions, they're just going to go all full out yellow pill, and then you'll have this like race play kind of white nationalist Asian chick with, and it's like this weird thing that's happening.
Pilleater, what you're advocating, you're talking kind of a fusionism, but
it's not racial mixing
that could,
at all. It's not talking about.
I know what you're talking about, but with that kind of thing, usually kind of one group ends up being dominant. So you kind of, with your thing, is you get it from both sides, because the alt-right is going to say you're the alt-right is going to say they're going to say you're a cuck, and then you have this concept called the new cuck. But then the thing is, if you say it's just white male and Asian female, then you're hostile towards Asian men. But then if you say your Asian men are welcome, then you're a cuck to the white race. So either way, you piss off one side.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole far left, far right, even normie, or I'd say it far normie hates it, because there isn't words or meanings to describe an issue that's going to mean something if current trends continue. I would love there to be white nationalism now so we won't have to deal with this, but if things go currently away and we see more white guys banging Asian chicks because they like anime and video games, well, that's what's going to be their offspring. You're going to have to deal with that, and I mean, it's just what you're saying is right.
Is that really the case? I mean, the guys who are the most into like all this weeaboo, anime shit, they tend not to be getting laid for any woman of any race. Like, I probably have slept with more Asian women than any other man I've known, and I never cared for any of that shit. Honestly, it's usually it's true that Asian women tend to be more forgiving of these sorts of nerdy type stuff than white women are. They aren't searching for the super chiseled, Chad type. At the same time, they're not going to tolerate no woman's going to tolerate some fucking loser in his, parents' basement watching Trigun or whatever nerdy. Well, I can't be bothered to remember the names of these animes.
I was at where I'm from, and it's just, you see like the most nerdy white male, president of the video game club, and he has like a hot like Asian girlfriend, and it's like there probably won't be around, but just think, they might have kids if things go, but like the normal persons, right, who are not that video game stuff, like Matt, like they're into the like punk shows, and their favorite band is like Juju and Mitski and Atari Teenage Riot, and I've been a part of that scene, right? I had a girlfriend, like this Chinese American girlfriend with tattoos and blue hair. Here's the thing though, these Asian feminists, they're basically pseudo white nationalist, because the feminism to Asian culture basically means I want like a white husband, because that's basically being disorderly to Asian, Confucius values, and it turns up loving traditional patriarchy and pisses off white feminists, and it's like it's a strange thing that's happening, right? And so it's like it has to be addressed. It's just this weird thing, and I mean, yeah, they're probably going to be talk about it, in the future. It's not that of a big deal. It's kind of avant-garde, but I don't tend to think about it. I mean, I'm going to have a book or two on the subject, and websites like animeright.news, the Anime Right, they're actually kind of addressing that too, because they're a bunch of weebs on the alt-right, and they kind of experimented with Asian girls. Some of them will be like,
yeah.
Some of them will be like, no, I prefer my white woman, Aryan woman in the wheat field, like Andy Nowicki says. But at the same time, it's like, there is that possibility that when they get yellow pilled, they'll start to realize they're going to go to Asian girls, and they won't have the words and means to do that. So, yeah, it's going to be, the Asian Aryan subject is going to be an important thing. Now, also, I want to mention, too, Robert is actually quite influenced from what I've been doing, and he has his own concept called Israeli Aryanism. So, Robert, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. We were doing a show about I think it was the meme magic of Alicia Silverstone. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, should I? Okay, well, the basically is this. If we have these Aryan subcultures, then obviously, Jews being like, it's Mr. Schleckelberg, and he's being conspiratorial again. But, however, according to Robert's argument, is that in California you have these, like, Jewish women wanting to be like normal white women. They really don't care about their Jewish culture, and so what happens is you create this weird Jewish white hybrid mix. They are Jewish and they'll be on the Jewish side, but at the same time, it's like this. They're even leaving the whole Jewish thing. I mean, that's what I'm getting from Robert. But at the same time, but the point is, it's basically you have loyalty to a different thing that you're not bound down to this. Whatever. I mean, that's what I'm trying to explain Robert Stark's theory in my own words, but I'm not so sure because he's only talking about Jewish women and not Jewish men, but I don't know. Maybe Luke Ford and the Jewish alternative could do a better job on that.
I have no comment, really, because this is all very new to me. I haven't paid it. I literally know nothing about any of this. So,
do you know the Jewish alternative? Do you know about that?
I haven't heard about it.
It's basically Jews on the alt-right, and everyone's getting pissed off at them because, they're Jews on the alt-right, and that means, they're up to no good, right? But according to Robert Stark and Luke Ford, and if you talk to some of these guys, like Joshua Seidel, it's just like, it makes sense, and it's kind of like having this, don't let that Jewish Kevin McDonald culture of critique get in the way, and basically create, peace or trust among. But it's going to be a really hard thing because, like I tell this to Robert, it's going to be the Jewish thing. You got to make sure you have a foundational Israeli Aryan thing. But the thing is,
if you watch those films, I mean, that has always been kind of like the standard of beauty, and like if you watch most films, and I think that is basically like men have this kind of ideal of this ideal woman, and like that's what they imagine.
I guess Robert likes to imagine Alicia Silverstone all the time, but blonde Jewish woman. But that's not my thing, though. I think it's flattering. Harlan Venison also said Black Aryanism or Negro Aryanism. I don't know what that is, but it's definitely kind of flattering when you start putting Aryanism with a race up front. But
well, with Harlan, I'm not really sure what he means by that. Because he's talking about things in a more abstract manner. I don't know if he means it in a concrete or racial manner.
Yeah, and like final.
But his book, it's about. I haven't read it, but I think it's about a neo-Nazi who falls in love with a young mulatto girl, and then they go on to form a revolution.
That's kind of
it's called a racist, anti-racist love story.
It's Deaf to the World. I'm writing like almost
that's
the same.
The one.
I'm almost writing the same thing. What's more my background, autobiographical. But the point is, I think that I firmly believe the Asian Aryan thing is much more of an important significant. It's cute when you say
because because of the sheer numbers
and the influence and the culture and the anime and everything seems to be the model minority. I just think it's much more significant to be talking about the Asian than. But it's cute to say Israeli and Black Aryanism, but at the current moment in time, I think Asian Aryanism. But to change the subject, back to Matt. It seems to me like if we talk about certain issues, somebody is going to holler on Facebook, going to be talking about, these shills, they're talking about race mixing, and they went too far. It's not these classic. And then what happens is people on the alt-right shame each other. One of the most saddest things I've seen in like the past 2 years is Greg Johnson on Countercurrents and Richard Spencer of Radix basically had two different exact science fiction futures of how they want their white-topia, but they never can agree on that, and now it's like this divide. But yeah, it's like those petty things shouldn't matter when everybody's pretty much on the same side. So how would you give advice to unite people on the alt-right, or what is there to do about petty conflict? Is it more like an apologizing thing? Is it more like creating bonds or understanding the other side, or is it more like in real life gatherings?
I'm probably not the best person to ask about this because Greg Johnson actually blocked me off of Facebook because I probably was too much of my posting about how his lifestyle is an abomination.
Oh,
but
okay, that's a little touchy.
What do you have against his lifestyle?
That's touchy. Don't bring that up.
I'm kidding, but basically, I think some people, on a certain level, there is going to be division. I mean, I look at it this way: there's been a lot of infighting and division from after the election, and that's just sort of natural. We were all sort of, you want to incorporate the alt-right, the alt-light, the alt-media. All these groups were sort of united in bringing Trump to power, and at least opposing the left. And inevitably, when you've achieved a major goal like that, old divisions are going to resurface. To a certain extent, it's inevitable because there's personality conflicts. Some people are drama queens. Some people don't want to, work together. Then there's legitimate ideological differences, like the big split between civic nationalism and white nationalism. The best way to say the deal of it is to just sort of, assess things on a personal level and look at people and see who you want to associate with and and assess your own beliefs. And my general philosophy is I'm willing to I try to be friendly to people, and I really only condemn those who have a long history of drama seeking, or just general asshole-ish behavior, which, to be perfectly honest, and if there's people I don't like but aren't being overtly antagonistic to me and they're being helpful, I just don't talk about them. That's just that's just how I do things. So I don't
had incidences where you've had online feuds with people, but then you met them at an event in person and you were chill with them?
Yeah, to more or less. And then there are people who will go and reignite the feud afterwards because they are drama-seeking losers who have nothing better to do with their lives. But I try to steer clear of this stuff. I've been around long enough to see the rise and fall of so many different cliques and subcultures in the alt-right, manosphere, alternative media that to me, it's kind of I kind of feel like Dr. Manhattan and Watchmen. I've seen this shit before. It was boring the first 30 times I saw it. It's boring now. I'm just going to do my own thing.
A guy who was a little hostile to me at first was this guy named Michael Bell, and he wrote for Countercurrents. We actually met up in person, and he's the most coolest guy ever. And it turns out, we're really good friends at the moment now, and it just shows you that what seems to me like if you write on the internet, it's like, oh, that guy's a jerk, or we're two different people. But when you met in real life, it turns out that you have a lot of things in common, and it turns out that it's strange. It shows you that the internet is a little petty place. But I feel like in-group meet or pool parties can definitely give people together, or at least see them in real life, compared to if you go on Facebook and say, I hate, white people that do this. You're an anti-white, and it's this silly thing. I think a lot of people do take the social media way too much seriously, and I think that is a problem.
The alt-right, they think Pilleater is going to implement the clergy
plan. It's not true. And it's obviously not true because I've shook many hands with many alt-right figures, and if you were there, maybe, I could meet up sometimes if you're in the New York area. But, but it's like, I'm there, and it's like, it's not true. It's basically you have to take things with a grain of salt, and it's kind of it's a funny thing. We have like different identities. We're very artistic people. You know, if you were to be open about race war now, it's like then everybody's gonna, even the normie world's gonna hate on you. So you have some level of strange internet identity.
I look at a lot of the feuding as a result of a lot of these, quasi-autistic 18, 19, 20-year-olds coming into the movement. And like I said, the youth is a good thing. It's a good thing that young people are getting involved in right-wing politics. But a lot of these kids were primarily raised on the internet, and that was how they formed their view of the world and their conception of social interactions. I mean, I don't, I'm old enough. I'm going to be turning 29 in a couple of months. I'm old enough that I can remember an era before Facebook or all that. When I was a kid, we had to, if I wanted to communicate with my friends and whatnot, we had to actually, call each other on the phone, talk to each other in person and whatnot. There was no Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all this nonsense. But now you got kids who, they're during their formative years, that was how they interacted with the world, and it introduces a sort of an impersonal element to interactions. It makes them cockier. It makes them actually not so much cockier, but way more like aggressive and kind of unserious, if that makes any sense. And they don't interact normally. It's something they sort of have to grow out of.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm part of that generation. I can totally understand. It's like I have the name Pilleater comes from my trolling era on ytmnd.com, and YTMD is like an old, outdated troll website. It's not even and it just came along with me. And it's like now I'm serious, but I'm using the word Pilleater. And it's like, you still have that troll baggage on you, and it's it's interesting too that to change the subject a bit, it seems that the best way to red pill people is through the alt-light. Yet at the same time, there's a very much disliking for the alt-light because it's like multiculturalism, but it's basically red-pilled multiculturalism, where you have like Blair White, the tranny speaker who has like red pill ideals, or you have like, I think, Big T, the black libertarian, or some like black, and everyone's in a rainbow of color.
That guy T.
Oh, that guy T, yeah. Everyone has something to say, red pilling in nature, but it's like, it's still like a rainbow party of this colors and stuff. And yet, it's a good method to basically wake people, but people are not leaving from their like materialistic globalism thing. And so I feel
I think a lot of these issues are going to sort themselves out. Rocking Mr. E had a good video earlier in the week. So basically, the next movement we're going to see in the right wing is that a lot of open homosexuals are going to have to reform or get ejected, just because we're moving in a direction towards sexual morality. Like you brought up Blair White. What kind of an absurd world is in it where a transsexual is a voice of conservatism, or someone like Milo Yiannopoulos? For all the good he may have done, he's still a gay guy who's part of his shtick is bragging about all the black guys he has sex with, okay? And now that we've sort of collectively moved towards the right on nationalism and sex roles, I think the next thing is going to be more social sexual conservatism, and gays and all these other alternative lifestyles are inevitably going to be left outside of that. Speaking to my own observations living here in Europe, the two countries that most effectively resisted the migrant invasion into Europe are Poland and Hungary, who also happen to be the most conservative countries in Europe, the most Christian countries in Europe. Living here in Hungary, you don't see any SJWs with pierced noses or tongues and cotton candy colored hair walking down the street.
Did you see a lot of that in Sweden?
There was more of it, yeah. Sweden is totally paused. You don't see any of that stuff here in Hungary. There's no gay pride parades, none of this nonsense. I don't think it's a coincidence that conservative social values feed out into resistance to foreign invaders. Sweden, places like Sweden, France, the Netherlands, the states are completely, the blue states anyway, are completely overrun with these freaks, and coincidentally, they're also falling to what basically amount to barbarian hordes. So I think the next step is that the right is going to go in a more socially conservative direction.
Yeah, I mean,
I've heard people say the opposite. That I remember, I think it was Keith Preston, that like young people are more socially liberal, but there's this kind of concept of like a lost generation, and if you have a lot of millennials who become really dysfunctional, it is possible that the young people who are young today, the so-called Generation Z, they'll look to them and see a lot of them as not a good example. So it's possible that the next generation could be more socially conservative, but who knows?
I think a lot of it is, I don't think we have a whole lot to worry about. I mean, the fact that, like I said, young people got involved in the Trump campaign, the alt-right is in a big way is a pretty good thing from my perspective, and it harbors. The other thing too is that we have a situation in the states now where Trump and other major figures have helped create a perpetual rightward shift. For example, Anonymous Conservative talked about this on his blog. Have Trump ordering that the Department of Justice publish weekly a list of crimes committed by illegal aliens helps galvanize support, opposition to both illegal and legal immigration, because now we see the negative effects that they are giving to our society. The left's constant, acting out. The Berkeley incidents with the March for Trump protests. What happened at Milo's speech in Berkeley? They're shooting off bottle rockets and physically beating up people for attending the speech. That's pushing people to the right, because even more moderate or even sort of say moderate left people are seeing this violence and like, stop it. This is insane. So culturally, I see where another thing too with the recent revelations that the attack on Milo, accusing of being a pedophile. Milo, that whole thing inadvertently exposed that a lot of male homosexuals are that way because they were molested when they were little boys.
Yeah.
So they pulled the mask off and revealed a lot of social rot in the gay community that the left have been trying to hide from everyone. These perpetual rightward shifts are just going to keep happening and keep mounting up, particularly as the deep state and the left try to swing for anything to try and take down Trump on the right.
Robert, is there anything else you would like to add?
Let's see.
Just one more question.
I would like to talk about what is your advice on people who want to make a living online and looking to monetize their website?
First, save up a lot of money. Like, don't quit your job immediately. And number two, cultivate a skill, cultivate a talent. You're not going to go from being an 18-year-old NEET to living, making $1 million a month doing this stuff. But if you have a talent and a skill at writing, some sort of service you can provide to people, you can make money through that. You have to hone it over time, but you can do it. The way I live now is in many ways kind of like I said, I'm going to be 29 soon. I've been kind of in some form or another doing stuff like this for most of my adult life since I was 18. It just wasn't until a few years ago that sort of hit pay dirt, as it were. So you have to practice, cultivate your skills and talents. You have to live life a bit, okay? A lot of these kids in the alt-right could do well to get off the computers for a bit and go get laid or join the military or go hitchhiking or have some sort of life experience upon which you can use to ground your political beliefs in. So live life, hone your talents, and don't quit your day job until you've got a lot of money saved up and you're confident that you can go forward with this. It's something that I think more people can do if they put their minds to it.
Awesome. Well, it's nice talking to you, Matt, and I think we've covered a good discussion here, too. So I want to thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me on, Pilleater.
And I want to thank Robert Stark, too.
Thanks, guys.